All right, in this lesson, we'll discuss parallel variable assignment as well as swapping the values in two variables. Let's begin with parallel variable assignment. So I'm just going to add a comment here. Parallel variable assignment. Let's say I have three variables and I point them each to three different numbers. I have a variable called a. I'm just picking a very simple one-character variable name. A equals 10, b equals 20, and c equals 30. So I have three different variables here. I can output them PA, PB, PC, and we can see here they're all output to the right. We've assigned three different numbers to three different variables. The first thing I want to show you is a shorthand syntax that we can use for the P method. Instead of writing everything here on a separate line with a separate P, what we can actually do is use commas after everything that we want to output. So instead of writing this three times, what I can do is write a single P followed by A, then a comma followed by B, and another comma followed by C. These are just my three variable names. And what this will do is output all of them to the screen without having to write all those separate lines. So when I execute this, the result is going to be the exact same. We're going to get 10, 20, 30 on separate lines. And the same logic applies for the puts method. If I do puts A, B, C, we're going to see that appear on the right as well. Print is going to be interesting because it's not going to create any kind of spacing or any kind of line breaks between them. So if I do print A, B, C, I'm just going to put a puts here so we can see the separation. We can see here that on the very top we've gotten 10, 20, 30 just right after each other, just printed out there because the print method doesn't create any line breaks or spaces. But either one of our three output methods, whether it's print or puts or P, can simply have commas separating each of the things that we want to output. We'll go into the syntax of why this works later. This is actually inputs that we're giving to each one of these methods, but we'll dive into that at a later moment in time. Just know that you can use commas to separate either the variables or the values that you want to output with either one of these three methods. So let's get back to P, A, B, C right here. Now this is fine and this is totally valid. Ruby code, as you can see, it's functional, but there is a shorthand way of doing this, or a shortcut, if you will. What we can do instead of this, I'm going to comment it out by selecting it and pressing either Command or Control / So now those are invalid. In fact, if I execute this right now, we're going to get an error because Ruby has no clue what A, B, or C is because these lines are comments and Ruby has not actually executed them. But what I can do here is instead of writing them each on a separate line, I can do A, comma B, comma C, equals 10, 20, 30. And this works exactly as you'd expect it to work. Ruby is going to take the variables on the left side of the equal sign and point them to the objects on the right side of the equal sign. So A is going to be assigned to 10 because that's the first variable in line. B, which is the second variable in line, is going to be assigned to 20. And C, which is the third variable in line, is going to be assigned to 30. Now, of course, if there is a wrong number of either objects or variables on either side, we might run into an error. So for example, if I do something like 40, we might run into an error. We don't in this case. In that case, it's simply going to be ignored. Let's see what happens if we put something like D here. In that case, we still don't run into an error. There is no problem there. But generally speaking, the number of variables on the left and the number of objects on the right that you're pointing those variables to should be equal. That just keeps things simple and avoids any kind of confusion. And if I execute this code, we can obviously see that we have the exact same output. So this single line of code is the exact same thing as these three lines of code here. And because shorter is generally considered better in programming, this is a syntax that you may see in professional Ruby code. This is called parallel variable assignment because variables are assigned on a parallel level on the same line to different objects in this case. In this lesson, I also wanted to cover swapping two different values. So let me get rid of all of this stuff. And let's say I have a simple two variable, two object assignment. I have a variable called A, and I'm going to point it to 1, and a variable called B, and I'm going to assign it to 2. So if I output PAB, we can see that we have 1 and 2 on the right here. Let's say I want to swap the values in these variables. So I want B to now be equal to 1 and A to now be equal to 2. Of course, I can do this manually by doing something like A equals 2 and B equals 1. And if I output P, A, B below, we can see that its values are going to change. And of course, this is all doable because variables can have the objects that they point to change. That's why they're called variables, because they vary, because they can change whatever it is that they're pointing to. So we can see here that A and B have had their numbers reversed, and now we have the proper result on the right. However, this is a little bit of a roundabout way of doing it. There is a shorter thing that we can do. So what I can do here is write a expression like this. A comma B equals B comma A. Now, why does this work? This works because whatever happens on the right side of the equal sign always takes place first. Remember that. So let's completely ignore this stuff right here and just focus on B comma A right here. At this point, B and A are already assigned. B is assigned to 2 and A is assigned to 1. So what Ruby is going to do is find those object references, find those numbers that those variables are referring to, and basically store them in sequence, just like it does for when we just did variable assignment. At that point, this part of the equation, the right side, has been evaluated, and it's going to be 2 comma 1. And at that point, we're simply going to take these variables A and B and reassign them to that result on the right, which is 2, 1. And then we're basically going to make that assignment and swap those two values. So A and B are now going to be equal to the exact same thing, 2 and 1 instead of 1 and 2. And this works again because whatever happens here happens first. It's a little bit confusing because you're thinking, how can I assign a variable to the opposite variable, and you see these B's and A's on the exact same line and they're separated by commas, and it looks kind of funky to someone who's viewing this for the first time. But the important takeaway to always remember is what happens on the right side happens first. So B and A is evaluated first here to give you 2 comma 1, and after all of that is done, then these variables are assigned to those respective values, and A, B are going to be equal to 2, 1 at the end of that operation. So that is an introduction to parallel variable assignment and swapping values in Ruby.